What if everything you've been told about Africa being divided was actually a strategy to keep it that way? Stay with me, because the true story of Pan-Africanism isn't just history. It's a hidden blueprint for power that still affects your life today. Because long before borders, flags, and passports, there was a deeper truth. Africa was never meant to be divided. And by the end of this video, you'll understand why the idea of one Africa terrified empires and why it still matters right now. Picture this: the late 1800s. Africa is not free. European powers have carved the continent like a cake during the scramble for Africa, drawing borders with rulers, not reason. Families separated, kingdoms erased, identities fractured. But here's the question most people never ask. What happens to a people when their history is interrupted, but not erased? That's where something powerful begins, not in Africa first, but in the diaspora. Across the Atlantic, in places like the United States and the Caribbean, descendants of enslaved Africans begin to awaken. They start asking dangerous questions. Who are we? Really? Where did we come from? And why are we scattered? One of the loudest voices to rise was W.E.B. Du Bois. But Du Bois didn't just speak, he challenged the world. At the historic First Pan-African Conference, he made a bold declaration. The problem of the 20th century is the problem of the color line. Let that sink in. He wasn't just talking about racism, he was exposing a global system. And here's the loop you need to hold on to. If the problem was global, then the solution had to be global too. Then came a man who didn't just speak to the mind, he ignited the soul. Marcus Garvey. Garvey didn't ask for acceptance, he declared identity. He built the Universal Negro Improvement Association, a movement that reached millions. His message? Africa for the Africans. But here's what made it powerful. It wasn't just about geography. It was about ownership, of identity, of destiny, of future. And suddenly, something began to shift. Black people across the world started seeing themselves not as scattered victims, but as one people. Now pause here, because this is where it gets deeper. If unity was rising, why wasn't it allowed to fully succeed? Enter the meetings that most history books barely explain, the Pan-African Congresses. These weren't just gatherings, they were strategy rooms. Activists, scholars, and leaders came together to answer one question: how do we reclaim Africa, politically, economically, and spiritually? And every meeting added fuel to the fire. Ideas turned into movements, movements turned into pressure, pressure turned into change. But the real explosion, it happened when the movement returned home. Now we move to Africa itself. A young man educated abroad, exposed to these ideas, returns with a mission. His name? Kwame Nkrumah. Nkrumah didn't just believe in independence, he believed in unity beyond independence, because he understood something most leaders didn't. Freedom without unity is fragile. So when Ghana became independent in 1957, the first in sub-Saharan Africa, it wasn't just a national victory, it was a signal, a spark, a message to the entire continent. If one can rise, all can rise. But here's the twist. Independence came, flags were raised, anthems were sung, but Africa remained divided. Why? Because the borders stayed, the system stayed, and in many ways, the control adapted. Now think about this. What if Pan-Africanism was never defeated, but simply delayed? Because its influence didn't disappear, it evolved. You see it in cultural pride, you hear it in music, you feel it in movements for justice across the world. From protests to policy, from identity to innovation, Pan-Africanism is still alive. And here's the part most people miss. It's not just a political movement. It's a mindset, a consciousness. A realization that your story didn't start where you were born, it started long before. So the real question is no longer, what is Pan-Africanism? The real question is, what will you do with its legacy? Because the same forces that once divided still benefit from division, and the same truth that once united still holds power. So imagine this, an Africa connected, not just by land, but by purpose. An Africa where identity is strength, not confusion. An Africa where collaboration replaces competition. That vision, that's not new. That's the original idea. And now we come full circle. Remember the question at the beginning. What if division was designed? Now you see it. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. So the next time you hear Africa, don't just think of a place. Think of a people, a movement, a mission still in progress. Because Pan-Africanism was never just born, it was awakened. And maybe it's awakening again. If this opened your eyes, stay with this journey, because the next story will reveal how Africa's identity was renamed, reshaped, and rebranded.